A rapidly expanding federal government is stripping power from the states and the people, creating a massive regulatory state that's saddling citizens with piles of red tape and enforcing political agendas that no one voted for. That's not the way America is meant to be. The Declaration of Independence says that all men are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Today, though, many Americans don't seem to understand or appreciate the Declaration's gravity. As a result, it seems we've lost touch with much of what makes our country so special, the distinctly American belief in the dignity of every human soul. In his new book, Our Lost Declaration, Senator Mike Lee shares new insights into the events that shape the ideas in the Declaration of Independence and makes clear how what he describes as the many abuses of federal power we see today are happening because we've forgotten our leaders in Washington, D.C. serve us, the American people, not the other way around.
Senator Mike Lee joins us now from our Washington studio. And Senator, it's such a pleasure to have you back with us. Thanks for being here.
Pleasure's mine. Thank you, Pat.
Could I ask you the Declaration was written against the abuses of King George. What were some of the things that the Crown was doing to the colonists that the Declaration addressed?
As I explained in my book, Our Lost Declaration, King George III visited a number of privations of the dignity of the human soul on the American people, including, among other things, withholding his consent for the convening of legislatures, withholding his consent for legislation that would have allowed for the effective operation of the court system. I even refer to the fact that he played a significant role in the slave trade and in perpetuating that evil on this group of people. And I discuss in Our Lost Declaration the fact that Thomas Jefferson called the king out for all these infractions, including the latter one, including slavery itself. That language, unfortunately, was eliminated from the final draft. But language acknowledging that all men are created equal survived, and that, in turn, helped us ultimately get to the point where we could eliminate the abominable scourge of slavery.
You know, we did a series on a nation of criminals, and I've had our staff researching how many federal bureaus have put criminal sanctions on some of their regulations. And as I recall, it was something like 300,000 crimes that they have. Could you tell us a little bit about your feeling about that?
Yes, you correctly describe a problem that we've got in this country. We've got hundreds of thousands of pages of federal regulations on the books. Regulations put in place not by Congress, but by government bureaucrats acting pursuant to delegated authority by Congress. Whenever they decide to make a particular course of conduct criminal, that can become criminal. We asked a few years ago if we could find out the total number of federal criminal offenses that could be committed, including those so-called regulatory offenses. We were told that the total number was unknown and unknowable, but that there were somewhere in the neighborhood of 300,000, probably more. This is insane. This is absolutely absurd, and this is exactly the kind of multiplicity and unnecessary complexity within the law that our founding fathers rebelled against and decided was too much.
Does the president have the power to nullify those things, just to say they weren't put in by Congress and therefore these federal regulatory agencies are not authorized to put these crimes on the books?
The president is subject to a series of laws that created each of these departments, agencies, and bureaus. And he's got some authority with regard to stopping the promulgation of new regulations. It's one of the reasons I'm pleased that President Trump's administration has made sure that for every new regulation it issues, it gets rid of at least two. They've taken a really strong, mature approach to this problem, which I would like to encourage and commend them on. With regard to those regulations that have already been put in place, there are ways of changing regulations. There are ways of getting rid of them. It is more time-consuming, more cumbersome. It is difficult. But fortunately, we do have a president who's committed to that. In the long term, what we really need, as I explained in our Lost Declaration, is for Congress to pass a series of reforms requiring that all new regulations should have to be approved by Congress before they take effect. This would put your elected lawmakers on record before they put something into law.
Do they not want to go on record? Is that the problem?
That is the problem. And one of the things I describe in our Lost Declaration is this phenomenon that you have today a group of federal lawmakers, most federal lawmakers, who perhaps see achieving perpetual smooth sailing reelection as of paramount importance, to the point that they're not even jealously guarding and defending that one prerogative that Congress and Congress alone has in our federal system, which is to make federal law.
Well, what does the Declaration have to say about the dangers of big government? In your book, The Lost Declaration.
First and foremost, it acknowledges that human beings have infinite worth. They themselves are valuable and equal in the eyes of God. And that as a result of that, we have to understand that governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. And that whenever government becomes abusive of those ends, it's the right of the people to alter or abolish that form of government that's harming them. So in other words, the message of the Declaration of Independence and the message of my book, Our Lost Declaration, is that when government serves the people, great. When it doesn't, it is up to the people to fix it, to turn around. Most importantly, that government is there to serve people, not the other way around.
You know, we have been dealing with the ACLU and the abuses that are taking place by the federal court system, and the Supreme Court has been the ultimate arbiter of our social norms in this country for some time, and a few unelected judges, I mean, it just takes a small number, have changed the way Americans deal with all kinds of things. What can be done to rein in the courts?
The best thing that can be done to rein in the courts, to make sure that we have better judges, is to elect a president who says that he will appoint judges who will read the law and interpret the law based on what the law says, rather than on the basis of one particular social policy or ideology. It's one of the things I'd like to commend President Trump for. During his time in office thus far, he's put people on the U.S. Supreme Court, on the appellate courts, and on the federal trial courts who have done precisely that. That is the biggest, strongest defense that we have against encroachment by the judicial branch on the other branches, particularly the Congress.
One last question. You've been considered as a possible candidate for the Supreme Court. Is that something you'd like to do, or is that in the cards for you at all?
Well, at the moment, Pat, I'm busy representing the people from the great state of Utah in the United States Senate. If at some point a vacancy came along and the President of the United States asked me to be considered for such a role, I would not say no.
Thank you, Mike Lee. God bless you. Hey, the book is called Our Lost Declaration, something you need to read and understand, because we need to fight against tyranny, and the deep state in our nation has taken away the power that you have as